So today I'm going to show you how I made my most recent song called Plethoria, and well, it's not the most recent song on the channel, but it's the most recent song that I have produced, in the sense that I finished it like a couple of months ago, and I haven't made anything proper since. And I just think the story behind this is a lot more interesting than the story behind the rest of my music. So yeah, that's really it. That's my introduction. Let's get straight into it. So it started when I was on GarageBand one night. I was very bored, and I was just looking through the loops, because I've always really liked the loops on GarageBand, like from when I was very small, like 7 years ago, longer even. And I found this one that I really liked, and it was called Plethora Synth Layers. So this is what it would have sounded like. I'll bring it over here, and I'll take off the effects so you can hear just the raw loop on its own. Basically, I just screen recorded it on my phone, then sent it to myself on WhatsApp, and then I just converted the MP4 into an MP3 and dragged it in here, and this is what it sounded like. So that was cool and all. I just really like the synth. I want to make it into a full song, so that's what I did. So I started with the drop. I usually start with the drop in my music, so that's where we're going to start here, because I'm going to try and bring you through the exact process that I went through, as well as I can remember it. So I'm going to mute everything else in the drop and just keep this. So I think now we have this with no effects. Yeah, so the first thing I did was I added a few effects, just to make it sound a bit better. So first I thought it sounded a bit muffled, so I added this EQ, which boosts some of the trebles and takes away some of the upper mids, and that made it sound like this. And I just thought that sounded better. There's also this reverb that comes in the second half of the song, but it's not on for most of the song, so it doesn't really matter. You can ignore it. And then I routed it to this master channel up here. What I do is I take each individual sound and I route it all to one channel, and that way I can apply the sidechain and all the other effects together, and they'll all be the same. So that's what I did. So the next thing I did was I added, as you can see, I added a sound goodizer, which is a multi-band compressor. Just made it sound a little nicer. I'll just play it here and add in these slowly. So you can hear that one made it a lot louder, and it just sounded a bit nicer as well. I don't really know what it is, I just love multi-band compression. So much so that I added another multi-band compressor, OTT. I think it's over the top, is what it stands for. And not much, the mix was pretty low, so then it went to this. And it was sounding better, so I added a reverb, just a smaller reverb, which you can't hear that much, but it did help make it sound less empty in the parts where this was the only thing playing. There was another EQ which cut out the bass frequencies, because of course you don't want bass frequencies too much in your chords, because otherwise it's going to clash with the bass, and that makes your mix sound really muddy. So that's the next thing I did. Then I added a filter, which I used just to make it like kind of slowly come in at the start. You'll see where that comes in, so you won't hear a difference. And then balance, this is the sidechain. If you didn't know, the reason we sidechain in making music is because we don't want the elements of the song to clash with the kick. Because if they're clashing with the kick, you can't hear the kick, so you need to give it space. And the way we give it space is you just cut off the sound while the kick starts, and you quickly bring it in. So that sounds like this. Some of the sidechains actually off. Can't believe I did that. Well, I can fix that now, can't I? There we go. Oh, it's just one off. It probably didn't make too much of a difference. So then with the sidechain, it sounded like this. And that's all the effects I added onto it. So after that, the next thing I did was I just did drum. No, I think I did the bass next. I don't remember No, I did the chords next. You can actually see, because this is pattern 1, pattern 3. So these are chords, but I like to add in chords. These were kind of lacking treble frequencies. If you look up here, you see it's up in the right side. It's lacking a bit. So I made more chords that weren't lacking. So if you have a look, they're a lot more full here, and you can hear they're a lot more like, I don't know what the word for it is, like hissy, I suppose. So I basically just took the root notes of the chords and made a very simple chord out of it and played the main melody on top. And these chords were under the same effects as the one I chose before, because I routed them to the same track. I believe this is... Oh, it's 4 sounds. I actually didn't know that. So here are the sounds. This one is just a preset. This one is not a preset. It's just white noise. Why would it be a preset? This one is another preset. And then a piano, I believe. Yeah, I like Dance Piano 2007. It's a really nice piano. Then all together, that sounded like this, right? And then I added all the effects that I mentioned previously, and it sounded like this. And then at this point, it sounded like this all together. So you hear... It's more hissy. We got the high frequencies, and that's what we needed. Especially, normally you'd leave it up to the main lead to fill up the high frequencies, but you'll see why I couldn't do that later on when I come to the lead. I think at this point, I just kind of did the drums, because it helps me kind of get an idea of how the sidechain and bass line should work. So I got this kick from the, I think it's like electro, dirty electro thing from Vandalism? Vengeance, Dirty Vengeance, Dirty Electro, that. So this is the kick. I don't know. I didn't put any effects on it. This is just the way it was. And then I added in these pre-shifted claps, because of course in Future Bounce, well, this wasn't meant to be Future Bounce, but I produce mostly Future Bounce, so I added in pre-shifted claps. So here are the claps. This one is just called Brooks Clap. I have no idea where it came from. This one came from an ultrasonic sample pack. I really like his sample packs. And together they sounded like this. So individually they didn't sound great, but together they were nice. Right? And then when you play it with the kick, it sounds like this. So the next thing I did was I added some drop claps just for more atmosphere. They help to just kind of make it feel less empty. You'll probably hear me say that a lot. I added some... I like to add in this crowd FX. I just use the same one every time. It sounds like this. And I believe it's sidechained. Yeah. Again, you don't hear these small details too much, but it's only when you take them away that you notice that they're there, and I'll show you that later as well when the drop is done. It's that they just help to make it feel more full, but you don't really notice them on their own. And then the last thing I did was I added a sweep down. And that was it for this part. Then I added in this cool reverb snare that I really like, because it kind of sounds like someone cheering, I suppose. So that comes in here. And then after that, that's when I add in some rides. And since progressive house usually reminds me of snares, so I just added in some snares. You don't notice them too much, but then this sounded like this. And then once we got past this, there was a bit without any drums, and then it slowly comes back in again. I added in a riser, which I made myself in Silent a really long time ago. I don't know where it is now. I just have this WAV file. I also added in some hi-hat loops, because I'm lazy. It was actually only one hi-hat loop. I normally add in more, but here it looks like it was just one, and then it sounded like this. And you get the drift. So then at this point this is what it all sounded like. I had the chords and the drums, and it sounded like this. Right? So the next thing, of course, you're going to need in a song is a bass, because the bass, as I said earlier, we removed the bass frequencies from this so that it would make space for the bass later on. So here's the bass. I really don't like how the bass sounds, but you don't hear it that much. And the point is that you don't hear it much, but it has good frequencies. So you'll see later on, I did change the bass a bit in parts so that it wouldn't sound as bad, but in the main drop, since you can't hear it too much because there's so much else going on, I just left it like this because it has lots of nice frequencies. So this is how it sounded. Yeah, it doesn't sound great. It's comprised of 4 sounds, so they are 3 of them are serum, and I think the sub bass is just silent. Yeah, so here's the sub bass. Then there's a serum preset. This is one that I made. Another one, I made this one too. And this one, I also made. And all together they sound like this. And I didn't want it to sound too like linear, I suppose. I didn't want them all to just be like just going the same. So I just made them alternate octaves. It makes it sound a bit more interesting. And it just follows the same rhythm and the same bass as the chords. In terms of effects, I don't think I did anything individually, or I did. Here I added an EQ. So which one is this? Oh, this is for the sub bass. So yeah, I was just getting rid of some of the mid frequencies, because you don't want mid frequencies in the sub bass. The whole point of the sub bass is to get the sub bass frequencies, which are down here. So we don't want as many up here. I added a camel crusher onto one of the basses. Basically just makes it a little louder. It doesn't add too much. So if we get rid of all the effects, it's the same kind of effects as the chords. It actually makes virtually no difference. A little bit. So it's just multi-band compression. Get rid of the sub-bass frequencies, because then that'll make room for the sub-bass. And getting rid of some treble frequencies to make space for the chords on the lead. And then these fruity balances are for the sidechain. And also, later on, I got rid of the bass. So I use that. There's a big long one here. Yeah, that goes up and down. So by this point, it sounded like this. And actually, just to show you why I made these some of these an octave higher, you can see if I put them an octave lower, like this, it sounds very boring. Whereas if you don't do that, it sounds more interesting, and that's all what music's all about, being interesting. So, after this, of course, the thing it's missing now is a lead. That's what, because most songs will need a lead. Of course, there's exceptions, but the lead I used, so in the first part of the drop, it's literally just one sound, and the way I made this sound was a complete accident. It sounds like this. And you might think it doesn't sound great, but with the rest of the stuff it does. So what happened was I was making it, so it wouldn't have had effects. So it would have sounded like this, right? So without any effects, it sounds like this. So I was just messing around. It has lots of resonances. It's just a detuned square pretty much with chorus. Oh yeah, and there's a saw here. So there's this bit. And that's what it sounded like. And you see, if I left it just like that, it would have sounded like this in the overall drop, right? It would have sounded like this. Of course, we don't want that. It sounds very harsh. So I was just messing around, and I put on an effector, and I got this lo-fi, which is like kind of a bit crush distortion. And I just put that on it, and all of a sudden it sounds so much better. It sounds like this now. And it sounded different. It sounded cool and interesting. So I decided to go with it and see how it would sound. So the other things I did was I added an EQ to get rid of some of the trebles. The trebles are really high because bit crushers make trebles very high. And I also got rid of the basses, of course, to make space for the bass. And then I routed it to the channel here, and I did what I did with everything else. I added a sound goodizer, I added OTT, and I added a reverb, and then a filter and sidechain. So without any of the multiband compression, it sounded like this. And then once you add it all in, all the effects sounds like this. And by this point, we had a full drop. So now if I play it, And then the second part of the drop is pretty much the same. All I did was on the leads here, I added in more sounds. So instead of just having this one square sound, I added in a couple more, 3 more, and it sounds like this. And it just sounds a bit more full, so I'll go through the other sounds. So this is the original one. So I added this. So since this one was primarily a square wave, I decided to make a saw wave. It has the same kind of thing going on with the bit crush. Then the next one was this vandalism lead. This one I tried adding the bit crusher, but it didn't sound great. I can show you. If I added it, it would have sounded like this. And I felt like I wanted it to sound more full, and the way to do that is to kind of not bit crush it, because bit crushing removes a lot of high frequencies and makes it sound less full, so I didn't do that. Then the last sound is this. This is actually normally like a really Brooks style lead, and it would be really aggressive, but I just turned down the sustain and made it plucky, and it sounds like this. Again, without the effector. And that was it. And that makes it, you don't notice it too much unless you actually really pay attention to it, and that makes it sound a bit more full. So that's the drop finished, I believe. I have this high, I think this is a high pass filter. Yeah, it is. You can hear the, if you look here, you can see the bass frequencies slowly retreat up. And that's just kind of a way of bringing it into a new section. So once I had the drop done, I went to the very start, which is what I always do. So, these are off. I don't know why. They shouldn't be, but they are. So what I did for the intro, the extended intro, which is like 30 seconds at the start and end of a song, where it's just kind of like a kick introducing it. It helps for DJs to mix it in, but I just do it because I think it sounds good. So what I did here was I just took a different kick, a less powerful one, and I took one, I think, did I use this in the drop? No, I didn't use this in the drop. I took a different pre-shifted clap and different drop claps, which aren't as loud. And then I took a little stab from the loop. This. Just because I thought this suited it. I tried a bunch of different parts of the melody, and I thought this suited it the most. So that's literally it. It's just like this every 4 bars. And then here, I added in a hi-hat and another clap to make it feel a bit more full. And then I added in the rest of the melody, or the loop, sorry. And then what I did here is I literally just copied and pasted the drop, but I just turned down everything. So as you can see, I don't have the main loop that I've been using in here. I do have the chords. I have the lead, which slowly fades in. And as I was saying earlier, I didn't like how the bass sounded, so I took away one of the layers and got this bass. And then I have this slowly fading in, I think. Or no, I don't actually. It just stays that level. I also have this little fill slowly building up. I also added in this vocal, which I'll come to later. It's kind of hard to explain now, but it sounds like this. And then altogether that would have sounded like this. And once I got to the end, I added just an exhaust and downlifter and an impact. And then what I wanted to do is I really liked how the loop sounded on its own. So what I did is I just kept the loop. I wanted some of the song to just be the loop on its own. So I decided what better way to do that than at the very start. So I turned on the filter that I was showing earlier and just had it really quiet like this. And then it just plays on its own like this, except it doesn't. So I added in this ambience, because without the ambience it literally just sounds like this. And that sounds really boring, so I added in this ambience just to kind of make more atmosphere and make it feel more full, less empty. And you can hear how much better it sounds just with the ambience. And then that rings out on its own for 8 bars, and then I start automating the cutoff. So you can see this is what's controlling it, so it's level, and then it slowly goes up in a linear slope. And you can hear it opening up slowly. You can see it up here, the frequencies slowly open up here. That's why it's called a low pass filter, because it only lets the lows pass and the highs get filtered out. What I did here is I added in a very basic beat. It's just a kick. It's the same kick from the start, except I took away the out. So basically, it used to sound like this, and then I turned this up and it sounds more snappier. Speaking of snaps, I added in a snap with it, so it's just like this. And I added in this respace just to introduce something different, some low frequencies. And I started bringing in the melody with a low pass filter. And it's slowly... So for these 4 bars, it's just that and this long fill, which you can barely hear. It just slowly comes in. This is the same impact. This is a different sweep. I put 2 impacts here for some reason. They're not even synced properly. And this is the same riser that I used in the drop. And there's a crash. So for 4 bars, that's all that's happening. So the build-up's kind of starting here, and you can hear it slowly fade in. You can hear this loop slowly fade in. So then here what I did is I added in 2 snares. We have this hard snare, and we also have a tight snare. So the hard snare is playing every beat, and the tight snare is playing every half beat. And then I automated the pitch, because they usually do that in EDM music. So the pitch range is 12, and the pitch range is 12. And then that just slowly goes up. And that's cool and all. I also had the kick playing with that. Makes it feel a bit more full. I split up the loop and made it just like kind of loop 2 parts over and over to build tension. I did the same with the lead. And I also pitched it up here. If I could find this, there it is. I think it sounds really cool, but it also sounds kind of hurts your ears a little bit. I think that's pretty much it for the build up, and that leads us into the drop, which I've already explained. Oh yeah, the pre-drop fill is just this snare that I was talking about, and there's also a sweep to sweep it in. Without the sweep, it just kind of quickly just sweeps it in. It's in the name. I said I'd show what it sounds like without some of these atmosphere effects that you don't hear too much. It would sound like this. And whereas if you have those in, it sounds like this. See how it makes it, like, you don't hear them that much, but they just add that little bit of atmosphere that you need. Makes it feel a bit more full. So we get to the end of the drop. What I do is I increase the reverb on the loop, because it makes it sound more dreamy, I suppose, as it slowly fades off and we get to the next part of the song. So what I did here is I got rid of the bass and I kept the sub bass just to make it sound less empty, and I took the loop and the main lead and they slowly fade out here with the filter, and I used the same sweep over and over and over again. And the reason I kept just the sub bass, which sounds like this, is because without it, it sounds like this. And that sounds very empty, so so they fade out, and it takes 8 bars. And then what I do next is usually what I do with my music is I have the start, you know, the first part being a nice, so the start is going to be electronic. And then I like to have a little breakdown in the middle that's very instrumental. And of course that's what I did here. So once these were pretty much faded out, I found a piano. I love this piano from Nexus. It's called Arena Ambience. It sounds so nice and just, I love it. So I took the same chords from the loop, except I just didn't have them playing. I just had them play a single note and sustain it, instead of having this like da 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 da, if you know what I mean. So that would have sounded like this by the time I did that. I think I have the cutoff down. Yeah, because it makes it sound more quiet, of course. And then I added in this little melody thing. It's just like, I don't know how I came up with it, honestly. I suppose if you add in an A sharp here, that kind of makes this a 7th chord. I think. I don't know what. No, it makes it a sus chord. I don't know music theory very well. It changes the kind of chord it is, but it makes it sound cool. So I just transposed it up. I just did what my ear told me to do. So that just plays like that on its own for about 4 bars. And then this little plucky synth starts coming in. And that's here. Then we have the exact same sweep. And what I did here was I increased the cutoff of the piano, so it goes from sounding like this to this. It's as if someone's pressing the keys harder. That's the kind of effect it has. I also made it a bit louder to compete with everything else that comes in. So what I did here is I wanted to make it instrumental, as I said, orchestral kind of. So I went into Nexus again, and I got this string. So what I did is I took the same chords, except I just added a bunch of harmonies that sounded cool. So what I like is, if you add in notes that shouldn't work together and put them octaves apart, it sounds really nice. So G sharp and G wouldn't normally go well together, but when you do it like this, it sounds good. You know? And then I just did what my ear told me again. I was just like messing around. I had an idea in my head, and then I wanted to go up higher. So this is the same as this, except I added an up higher note. And I wanted that to be a really epic note to stop on, and then bring back in the electronic aspect of the song. So after that, it sounded like this. I thought it was lacking trebles, so I took the same thing and put it on this flute sound, rainforest flute. And that added in the treble frequencies that this was missing, so. And I felt like that really finished it for me. And then, in terms of the piano, it was the same thing, except I took the melody of the loop that I've been basing the song off, and I just put it up top here. And I also changed the end of the bit here to go like, because it's a nice way to finish it off, I feel. So instead of just being like, da, 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 instead of being the same as here, it goes. And then that ends. And then there's a gap of silence, and then I took the first note of the loop and I reversed it. And then that reverses into it and brings us into the back to the electronics. The electronics, I don't know, the electronic stuff in the song. Same impact here again. The next thing we had was, this is the vocal chop I was talking about earlier. So basically, I just went onto YouTube and I looked up a cappella, and I just looked through a few of them, and I found Ed Sheeran, Bad Habits. I don't know if I should play this song. Oh, it doesn't matter if I get copyrighted, like. What? It sounds like this. If I can skip ahead a bit. You know, that kind of thing. So that would have sounded like this. But I wanted this to be in key, and this song is a semitone higher than the key that the Plethoria is in. So I just made it a semitone higher, and that would have put it in key to sound like this. But I didn't like how it sounded. I wanted it to be squeakier. I wanted it to sound like a girl, because normally with these kind of vocal chops, they usually are very high pitched. So I just made it an octave higher. and I just thought it sounded really cool. You can see I adjusted the velocity here so that they'd all be about the same. In terms of making the vocal chops, I just looked through the whole thing and found ones that sounded good and just messed around for a long time, actually. It took a really long time to find that. In terms of effects, we have the same as everything. Without the effects, sound like this. We added in multiband compression, EQ. There was this really sharp frequency here that I got rid of. There were more, but I decided to leave them in the end. There's a reverb, there's multiband compression. And then what I did is I rendered that, and I made it an octave lower. And, I don't know, it just sounds better when you have it an octave lower as well. So that sounds like this. You know, it sounds better than just one or the other on their own. So that was good. It's meant to be a bit quieter. That's what this balance is for. Yes. So I was happy with that. I wanted to keep the piano in because I liked how it sounded. And the pluck stayed as well. I added in the respace to keep in the low frequencies. And I added back in the main loop again. So while the vocal chop was playing, I didn't want... You see, the vocal chop's really high in, like, treble frequencies, and it's really loud. And the thing is, the main loop is also kind of high in treble frequencies, and it's also kind of loud. So I didn't want them both to be playing at the same time. So what I did was, So... I had... The way the vocal chop worked, I couldn't find a good, like, way to fill in every second bar, so I just left it being every bar, and then a bar break. So here's the break, and then next bar. And then a break, and then another bar. So what I did is I decided I'd kind of have this call-response kind of thing. Again, this is another thing that's used in music production. And so the way it worked was, for the first bar, I'd have the vocal chop, which is the call, and then the response is this cutoff filter, which brings in the main loop a little bit, and then brings it away again. So that would sound like this. Oh yeah, sorry, I also forgot to mention, I have this tick-clap pattern, which is used in a lot of electro house. The first place I heard it was in K391's music from ages ago, and I just really like the idea of it. I think it has a cool rhythm to it. So then this would all sound like this, with the call response thing. So you can hear, this is low, then it comes in a bit, and then it goes away again for the vocal chop. And then after 4 bars, just so that it's not completely boring, I added in this little top loop. So that would make all the drums sound like this. Then once we got to the end here, since I was ending the vocal chop here, instead of having the main loop come up and go back down, I just made it go up all the way to the top. And then this is one of my favorite parts of the song. It's really cool. I don't know what other way to put it. We have the same impact as always. We have sweep down. And we have the same fill. Is it the same fill? Wait. It is the same fill. Except it's all the way. So back here, if you can recall, we had kind of just a normal kick, like a normal breakdown, and we had the build-up slowly fade in, and then it started here. So that's a 4-bar build-up. Here, I went for a full 8-bar build-up to kind of fully build the tension. So it's the same kind of idea as back there. I had the hard snare every bar. I didn't bring in the tight snare until the proper build-up, and I had the kick as well. And then I looped the main loop. So it's like da 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 da. And that slowly gets cut off downwards. I also looped the respace to keep the bass frequencies just on the same note. And then that just slowly goes down. I just think it sounds cool because it's kind of everything's coming to a standstill, and then we get down to the 4th bar, and then we have basically the same as the first build up, except this time we have the reverb enabled. Where's the reverb automation? Not here apparently. It must be here somewhere. I don't know. I just can't find it. Oh wait, it's here, isn't it? Yeah, here. So you can see here the reverb was on 0, and here it's on full. So that makes it sound more... Whereas here it was... It's just a bit louder, I suppose. And you can really... When you pay attention to it, you can tell. What I always found cool is when I listen to someone explain how they made a song, if you go back and listen to the song, you notice all these small things, and it just makes you appreciate it that little bit more. So, yeah, this part, other than that, it's the exact same, I think, as the first build-up. For the drop, I always like to do something a little bit different. Not completely different, just a little bit different. So what I did is I just made it seem normal. But then there's no kicks or anything. It just slowly fades down. Then all of a sudden it sweeps back up, and I decided to bring in this vocal chop from the break. And the way I structured it was we had both of them together for one bar. Since I didn't really want to do the call response thing for the drop, so we had both of them for one bar. Then for the next bar we had the lower one and alternate. And this balance make sure that because obviously both of them together is going to be louder than just one of them. So the balance makes sure that both of them together is quieter, and then when there's only one, it's louder, so that they all sound around the same level. And that sounds like that. Other than that, the drop is the same. I got rid of the main lead because I can show you if I left in the main lead, they'd be clashing. It's really messy. There's, you know, this lead is full of trebles. These vocals are full of trebles. It wouldn't work. So I got rid of the lead and I just had the chords playing. Other than that, the structure of the drop is pretty much the same. Over here, instead of having it, I think earlier what I did is I had a high pass filter come up and then it just goes back in. But instead here, I took a little section from the break, the piano and the vocals. And then I had this sweep up into the loop. And now it's the same as the other drop with the piano playing in the background this time. And then what I did is it's basically the same as the start. So now the main song is over. The main song's between here and here. So now we're down to the 30-second extended outro. So the way this worked, it's slightly different to the start, the first one, I think. Is it? Oh yeah, so at the start, what I had is I had this, and I didn't have the loop. In this one, I have the loop and not this. So they are a bit different. And then once we get to the extended outro, it's pretty much the same, except I just added in a bit of the vocal chop. And that just helps be a little bit different. So, and there's also this. I was just messing around and I came up with this. I originally planned to use this as the vocal chop and the drop, but it never really worked out. It was meant to be like this. So it was meant to sound like the drop. I can actually show you. It was meant to sound like this. So it would have been like this kind of thing. No, sorry, it would have been like, because this is meant to be from the start. So it would have been like this, right? I think. No, it was meant to be like this. Sorry. It was meant to be like this. But I didn't like how that sounded. I just preferred the one from the break, so that's what I used. But I decided I wanted to keep it in because it did sound kind of cool, so I just added it in as a little fill. Then it's just the same to the end. I decided what to do at the very end was to just have all of them come together, slowly sweep up with the cutoff, and then just go. And that is it, I believe. I tried mastering it, but it didn't sound great. It would have sounded like this. I'm not very good at mastering. I didn't feel like it was a big deal, so I just kind of left it out. So I think that's pretty much it. We can have a look. So I only spent 11 hours on this, and I started it on the 29th of October 2021, and I finished it pretty much just a few weeks later, and that's it. So I hope you enjoyed, I hope you found it informative, and if you have any questions, you can comment them down below. If you want me to talk about another song I made, you can also comment that down below, and if you have any video ideas, you can comment that down below. I'm not doing this as a proper YouTube channel, I just find this enjoyable to do, and I want to have a record of it so I can kind of look back at it in the future and be like, haha, I did that, you know? So, that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.